Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 7th of December 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And
apologies for the technical mix-up there.
Yes, sorry for that slight delay, but here we are, live. Well, weather is variable at the moment. Unfortunately, Brighton is not living up to its name and is not bright. It's quite grey there, apparently. Glasgow's a bit dull and rainy. Meanwhile, for much of the rest of the country is dry. Isle of Man, Plymouth, Manchester, Rhondda, or was it Rhyl? Apologies for the wrong one there, but it looks as though most of the country is dry. And for those people up in the Cumbria area, we have been thinking of you over the weekend, obviously, as you've suffered the flooding. Pretty incredible. Well, if flooding is serious for some people, the state of the nation is a lot more serious for many other people. And if you're of a weak disposition, turn away.
Indeed, because David Cameron has appointed Lord Strathclyde. He's been instructed to look at curbing the powers of the Second Chamber, the House of Lords. Now, of course, the House of Lords has been a thing of controversy for quite some time, as various MPs, various prime ministers over the years have appointed lots and lots more people to this unelected second chamber. And of course, they make a big deal of the fact that it's an unelected second chamber, and they imply that this is somehow undemocratic. In fact, what we have is a situation where the House of Commons, which is basically out of control at the moment, is only being reined in by the House of Lords. So according to various media reports this morning, they're saying that the House of Lords has in fact stopped the government on 70% of occasions since the May elections in pushing through some form of legislation, which is something that Cameron really particularly wanted. So he's pretty upset about this, and he has suggested that the House of Lords should be prevented in future from ever stopping the House of Commons from doing anything that it would ever want to do again in the future. So they want to kill your grandmother, no problem. The House of Lords won't be able to stop them. Whatever the legislation is. And what's pretty incredible is that many people commenting now that the House of Commons, or the government rather, is telling people telling ministers to use statutory instruments wherever possible to get legislation through. How dare this man suggest that the House of Lords is undemocratic when they're using these kind of tactics to push through legislation which nobody actually wants? And so I've labelled this slide with that German text there because, of course, after the Reichstag fire in the run-up to the Second World War, Hitler effectively suspended the German constitution, and this is exactly the type of thing that Cameron is doing here. If he prevents the House of Lords from doing their jobs, he is suspending the constitution of this country, and it should be seen in the same light as happened in the 1930s in Germany.
It's obvious what's happening, Mike, which is a dictatorship by stealth, and this is accelerating rapidly. And perhaps it's a good day to say to people out there that are focusing on problems with immigration or Islam or the Muslims, some people pointing fingers at the Jewish community, and we are saying at the moment, let's focus on the key people who are bringing in this legislation. We can see these people. David Cameron standing in front of us. And as we come on through the news, we're going to see the effect on politicians of a few people standing up and saying, no, we don't accept what you're doing. So I think part of what this is, Mike, is the fact that the establishment is now rushing to close things down because they can see the speed at which people are waking up.
Well, in the United States, things not going very well for the leader over there as well. Obama, of course, we'll come onto this in a bit more detail later on. Jumped on the latest mass shooting event and said that that was a terrorist attack. He's now saying that terrorism has evolved into a new phase. He's saying that the threat of terrorism is real, but we will overcome it. We will destroy ISIS and any other organization that tries to harm us. Now, who is us? I ask in this case. Our success won't depend on tough talk or abandoning our values or giving into fear. That's what groups like ISIL are hoping for. Instead, we will prevail by being strong and smart and resilient and relentless. Well, whoopie-doo. Unfortunately, Obama's latest rhetoric isn't going down very well with the American public, and it's quite incredible how it's being reflected in the mainstream media, which normally would not be quite so overt in their criticism of a president. But Boston Herald here, they're really criticizing Obama's latest terrorist type rhetoric, and particularly his comments that Benghazi wasn't terrorism. This is the Benghazi attack in Libya some time ago, and this article here finishes off by saying, yes, life is complicated, but the more complicated it gets, the more the American people are entitled to straight answers from the commander-in-chief, not more pap from a man who's apparently so blinded by his political agenda that he will use every opportunity to advance it. Barack Obama can obfuscate if he chooses, but the act is growing tired. The American people are entitled to truth from their president. Well, maybe the next one. Well, I don't think it's happened too much in the past, so I think you're not quite on the button there. But some of the other media, even more overt. Obama's dereliction, unfit for office. And this is I can't remember which Tribune this is, I do apologise. But anyway, he was basically suggesting two revelations. Michael Flynn's comments, this is the former Defense Intelligence Agency Director, General Michael Flynn, telling CNN that a small circle of Barack Obama's advisors were so preoccupied with the president's re-election that early intelligence warnings on the rise of ISIS were ignored. Well, we may have other views on that. And also a comment from the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Joseph Dunford, who basically said that a mere 2 months ago, the Pentagon and State Department had begun regular high-level meetings, but they hadn't done that beforehand. So criticism of Obama there, and really suggestions that he's unfit for office. This is reflected in the Washington Times, which goes even further. Has the president lost his ability to discharge his powers and duties of office? And whiz bang here, actually asking, is it time to invoke Section 4 of the 25th Amendment? So we're talking about impeachment, and this is reflected, I suppose, on this side of the Atlantic with the recent petition, House of Commons petition, which had over 180,000 signatures on it, calling for a vote of no confidence in David Cameron, before they wrote back to everybody concerned and said, I'm sorry, we can't do anything about that because votes of no confidence are outside the remit of this petition system. Yeah. Nonetheless, leaders on both sides of the Atlantic, people are not believing a word they're saying, and even the mainstream media on the other side of the Atlantic getting in on the act.
A couple of people called us this morning to say that they had seen, this is an allegation, of course, that they'd seen photos of Obama with a slightly dropped face. And the implication was that he'd possibly had a stroke. Now, we haven't been able to find anything to support that, but what is clear is that more and more people are beginning to question whether this man is fit for office. As you've said, Mike, same thing coming out about David Cameron. And of course, a few months ago, we were pointing out that President Putin was beginning to question whether he could make foreign policy against nation states that were being ruled by people who were not thinking in a right state of mind. And obviously, he was referring to the US and UK. Interesting times, bunker mentality.
Indeed. Okay, a couple of ads then. Before we talk about Patrick's radio programme, we'll just mention that there's no Crane Report or Fracking Nightmare tonight. Ian will be back next week on the 14th for the last episodes before the Christmas break. So no Crane Report or Fracking Nightmare tonight. But if you didn't hear Patrick Henningson's 21-Wire Sunday Wire radio show last night, please do have a look at it or listen to it. He was speaking to Ajamu Bakara, Vanessa Beeley, Stuart Hooper. They were talking about, it was entitled From San Bernardino to Syria. And so it was, I have to say, Patrick was on fire last night. So so do listen to that. And a bit of good news, we're holding a competition. We want to encourage some new talent. And so we are going to give away this microphone, the microphone stand, the software that goes with it. The computer is not included in this, I'm afraid. So basically a podcasting kit. If anybody would like to take part in this, what we would like you to do is to send us maximum 15-minute podcast on the subject of your choice. Don't worry about the quality of the recording at this point, and we'll judge the best of them, and the winner will receive the podcasting kit. And we'd like submissions in by the 1st of January 2016, obviously, and we'll announce the winner as soon as possible after that. And you can send submissions. There'll be audio files, so they won't be too big. I'm quite happy to take them over email if you send them to editor@ukcolumn.org.
It's brilliant and very easy to do because, of course, you can be sat quietly wherever you can be. You haven't got to worry about what you look like. You haven't got to worry about what you're dressed in. You can simply get the message out. So hopefully there are going to be...
Some of us don't worry about these things anyway, Brian.
Well, I wasn't going to mention that too much, Mike, but there we are.
Yeah.
Okay, where does that take us? China?
Well, Syria, really, because this is I'm not even going to pronounce the name here. The Chinese Foreign Ministry statement really supporting the Russian action in Syria. And so they've said, as for Russia's counter-terrorism campaign in Syria, China noted that it was launched at the Syrian government's behest and was meant to deliver a blow to terrorist forces inside Syria. The Chinese side always understands and supports counter-terrorism actions that are in line with international law and with the consent of the government concerned. At the same time, China believes the relevant parties should earnestly implement relevant counter-terrorism resolutions of the UN Security Council and give full play to the UN's leading role. Actually, President Putin also called for the establishment of a united front against terrorism under the aegis of the UN and in a State of the Nation address. So this is really the first time China has made a public statement on Putin's actions in Syria, and I suppose in the same regard, they're also making a statement about the West's response to that.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We've got Russia and China standing up and saying, well, if we're going to do something, it should be done within international law. And we've got David Cameron, of course, simply manipulating international law to allow his aggressive foreign policy. It's just an amazing change of belief systems, yes, of who's been telling the truth and who hasn't.
And in the meantime, an interesting article by Boris Johnson here in the Telegraph. Let's deal with the devil. He's saying why we should work with Putin and Assad, and quite interesting that this is the first sort of British establishment figure who is coming out and suggesting that perhaps we should get into bed with Putin. Now, of course, throughout this article, he make multiple occasions. He's making every attempt to make sure that we understand that he is not, as he says, a particular fan of Vlad. Quite the opposite. And then he goes on to say, am I backing the Assad regime and the Russians in their joint enterprise to recapture Palmyra? He's talking about, you bet I am, but that doesn't mean I trust Putin, and it doesn't mean I want to keep Assad in power indefinitely. So he's quite keen to make sure that he toes the party line in that sense. But he seems to be going up against Cameron here in suggesting that we should cooperate, we should get together with the Russians. Is he suddenly seeing some sense, or is it that he thinks that we can probably better manipulate the situation from the inside? Manipulation,
I would guess, without too much trouble, I think. Interesting photograph of those two, isn't it? That we've got the slim President Putin looking the statesman, and we've got David Cameron with a little bit of belly.
Looking like a Cabbage Patch doll.
Indeed.
Yes. Okay, and over the weekend we had news coming out of Poland that the Deputy Defence Minister Tomasz Szawkowski had told Polsat on Saturday that the Defence Ministry is considering asking NATO to be able to participate in NATO's nuclear sharing programme, and what that means is that the US would be allowed to place nuclear missiles on Polish territory. There's been a bit of a backtrack since then, and the Defence Ministry in Poland has now issued, it's a kind of retraction. They're saying that it's not engaged in any work aimed at joining NATO's nuclear sharing programme. The comment by the Deputy Minister should be set in the context of recent remarks made by serious Western think tanks, which point to deficits in NATO's nuclear deterrent capability on its eastern flank. So is that a retraction, or is it not a retraction? Are they stepping back or not? I think they're not really. They're kind of just testing the water to see what kind of public reaction they're going to get, and then backtracking as quickly as possible if the reaction isn't quite as they would like.
I think there's going to be a lot of testing the public reaction because they're frightened.
Yes.
This is the key bit.
And in the States, again, this is William Perry, former Secretary of Defense, and it's quite interesting because over recent months he is seen as being quite close to the current Defense Secretary, Ashton Carter, but his words are pretty strong on the dangers of nuclear war between the United States and Russia as a result of the fact that the bombing campaign with the British vote to go and bomb in Syria, and also the fact that Germany voted on Friday to go and bomb Syria as well. So the coalition of Western nations which is bombing Syria is growing, Mr. Perry here saying, we now face the kind of dangers of a nuclear event like we had during the Cold War, an accidental war, and that's really what he's highlighting, the dangers of when we're not cooperating with Russia, the dangers of the type of incident that happened with Turkey escalating in something significantly more serious. But this is the first time that I've seen a serious Western ex-politician commenting along these lines.
And of course, it wasn't properly covered in Westminster when there was the debate about going into Syria. We weren't hearing about this sort of level of risk.
Right.
David Cameron said it would all be over in a matter of weeks, I think, originally.
Well, that's what he originally said. Now he's saying it's going to take forever.
Right, and we're also waiting for the 70,000 good terrorists to stand up and be counted in Syria. No sign of those yet either, so we'll continue to watch.
No, but what we do have a sign of, which I thought was quite interesting, is The Guardian in particular was really pushing the notion that ISIS has created its constitution, that it's really setting itself up to be the state builders. And I was quite staggered, but I didn't include it in today's news, but anybody who wants to have a look at that, do so. It's a pretty amazing article.
And probably The Guardian's got that straight out of the Syrian Observatory based in the Midlands.
Possibly.
Straight out of a front room in the Midlands into The Guardian become, is it ISIS policy or Daesh policy?
Hard to say. Many of the mainstream media telling us that ISIL is another name for ISIS.
Right. But if these were the good terrorists, Mike, then the fact that they were going to come into the West and govern properly would be a good thing.
Yes, but it isn't. Okay, now we mentioned terrorism, and of course, as Patrick has been covering this heavily on 21st Century Wire, the San Bernardino media hoax, well, the whole San Bernardino event, and the fact that, among other things, the fact that President Obama called this for being a terrorist event before even many of the facts were known by anybody. Well, we have now had our own similar event, the Leytonstone stabbing. So somebody on the tube in London at Leytonstone Station pulled out a knife and attacked somebody, injured somebody quite badly, injured a couple of others, I think, less so. And of course, lots of video immediately started appearing on the internet. And because the person concerned shouted something along the lines of "for Syria," then this changed immediately from being somebody with a knife that was off their head to a terrorist event. And so we've got extra police being drafted into the national transport networks. And of course, they'll be armed. They'll be uniformed, and there'll also be undercover and armed police being drafted in to patrol stations and lines after a man was slashed in a suspected terror attack last night, according to this article. So what can we say?
Well, any of these could ultimately give Her Cameron the opportunity to bring in the Civil Contingencies Act. In comes restrictions on people meeting, curfews, whatever he wants. And in the matter of a few months, based on this highly suspect terrorist threat, we're straight into a controlled dictatorship. So it's happening in front of our eyes. We just encourage people to focus in on what is being done inside the UK, what is being done through Parliament, through the civil service, because this is where the real power base is. And of course, a man that we've mentioned before, we'll continue to focus on, is Oliver Letwin. What is that man doing inside the Cabinet Office? And what powers has he actually got? It appears that he is one of the key men simply controlling David Cameron. If anybody's got any further information on Mr. Letwin's activities, we'd be very grateful. Well, of course, criticise the government and you're in for big trouble. So the Express here with a classic article. We've got man charged with sending malicious messages to MP on Facebook. What's this about? Well, Craig Wallace, better known as Muhammad Muhaddid Islam. Sorry, not doing too well on that. But basically, here we are. We've got somebody who has got a foreign name, going to appear at Hendon Magistrates Court in London, and being held in police custody at the moment. We don't know what was said, but this was very, very frightening for an MP. Police are brought in and he's in custody due to appear in court. And in this article, a variety of other statements. We've got Neil Coyle, the MP for Bermondsey and Old Southwark, said police had stationed extra officers outside his surgery after he received an apparent death threat in social media. And Simon Danzuk's also been getting very worried that people don't like the fact he's voted for military action. Of course, no police activity around UK column when people get upset about things that we say. So we've got...
the only time we get police activity is when somebody's trying to track down Melanie Shaw.
Well, that's true. 7 officers on that occasion. But of course, if you've got a name which isn't completely British, you're going to be picked up pretty quickly. If you're a white female Tory MP, you can do what you like. So in this Mail article, we've got Tory MP who voted to bomb Syria in Facebook death threat row after adding "unless you die" to a constituent's email. So basically what she did is took an email which the gentleman on the right of your screen had sent in to her, and she sent it out again, but she'd added "unless you die" on the end of it. It's just quite amazing. This is as printed in the Daily Mail. So here's Lucy Allen's, here's the email originally sent in by a constituent. She adds "unless you die," and when Rusty complained about this, what she did is simply took it down. So if we put those two articles together, we got one law for politicians and another law for the public. But what is the real lesson out of this? I think it's the fact that the government MPs terrified the moment they come under the spotlight as individuals being held accountable for their actions. So when people are saying to UK column, what can we do? We can't do anything. We're getting an absolutely fantastic direction here that exposure and the truth is so powerful for all of the politicians in Westminster when they are identified as individuals, when they're made personally accountable. The fear factor sets in, and what do? They go running to Theresa May's private police force for assistance. So we've been told. But let's change tack, because of course while the focus is on terrorism, child abuse has completely dropped off the radar. I've no doubt that this was part of David Cameron's rush to get the bombs falling in Syria. He had said, after all, that child abuse was a risk to national security, and clearly he meant the security of the British government. So this was pointed out to us. It's spiked, and the article is simply saying that the Hampstead cult, well, it wasn't. It was all satanic panic revisited. And this was a spiked article written by QC Barbara Hewson. And the clear message of this article is you should trust everything that the Judge Palfrey, said. Never mind the fact that the police failed to investigate and interview suspects, especially where those suspects have been identified by the children as having highly intimate tattoos and physical marks. No investigation by the police. Trust the judge, effectively in a closed court. and the whole thing's nonsense. So we just remind you, here is Miss Hewson. She was being interviewed, Channel 4. She was asked about Jimmy Savile. She was asked if she found satanic ritual abuse funny, and she answered, yes, I do. So we were very interested to see the teaming up with Spiked, and we just thought we would ask a few questions. Now, one of the questions that we've been asking for some time is not who appoints judges, but actually who appoints the people that
appoint the judges.
that appoint the judges. We're talking about the Judicial Appointments Commission. This is taken straight from their website. They're drawn from the judiciary. Well, that's helpful. The legal profession, non-legally qualified judicial office holders, and the public all are recruited and appointed through open competition. So we're going to come back to this question, who appoints the commissioners? The commissioners are appointed in their own right. So who appoints them?
Does that mean they're self-appointed?
Well, this is where it gets very murky indeed, because the appointments come from the government. So there is no independence in the appointment of judges at all. Therefore, we have no reason to believe a word they say when they're in court, apart from the fact, of course, they claim by their wigs and gowns to hold high status and impeccable trustworthiness. Well, if Miss Hewson's under the spotlight, let's come back to Spiked. This is another of their articles. We've called it crafted journalism. It's clearly saying that the Goddard inquiry is therapy, not justice. But get into this very skillfully written article, and these are two of the key statements. Far from making children safer, this inquiry will merely add to the contemporary panic around child abuse, which continues to corrode the relationship between adults and young people. The last thing we need is more scaremongering. So the inference is that if you dare ask about child abuse, you're actually breaking down good relationships between adults and young people. Well, if you think that was one paragraph, read this one. While the Goddard inquiry, has little hope of developing any novel recommendations for child protection, it will be very effective in stoking up and maintaining our unhealthy obsession with child sexual abuse, an obsession that is proving deeply harmful to the relationship between children and adults. So you dare to mention child abuse, you dare to try and protect children from wide-scale abuse, and you're suffering from an unhealthy obsession. Mm-hmm. Well, what sort of magazine is Spiked? This is them in their own words. It was launched in 2001 as Britain's first online-only current affairs mag. Metaphorical missile against misanthropy. It's the publication that puts the case for human endeavour, intellectual risk-taking, exploration, excellence in learning and art, freedom of speech with no ifs and buts, and so it goes on, until it says that we echo Saint Simon, who said the golden age, which is a blind tradition, has always placed in the past. It's really in front of us. Spiked is all about laying the ground for and having a pop at the enemies of that still to come golden age for humankind. So this is a bit occultic, Mike. I'm not sure what they're into here, but they're ready for the golden age. And if you're not happy with the golden age, they're going to stop you. We phoned them this morning to ask whether they had done any research themselves into the Hampstead case. And I regret to say that they got rather aggressive on the telephone. But the inference was that they hadn't done any investigation. They'd just simply taken the article from Ms. Hewson, and she was very happy to give it to them, apparently without being paid for the privilege. Well, we went doing a little bit of research on the people involved, and the internet is a wonderful thing. We'd encourage people to go and read this blog, Guy Debord's Cat, Defending the Indefensible, and the LM is referring to Living Marxism position on paedophilia, its hysteria. And what did we pick up? Well, this was the name we found, which is Brendan O'Neill. Explain that, so we can bring it in here. This gentleman's involved with Spiked. But the key question, my question to O'Neill and his LM buddies is this. Why do you defend the indefensible? They would tell us it's because they're libertarians, but can we take this to mean they seek to dismiss allegations of paedophilia as trivial nonsense, or is it that the case that they're actually doing the bidding of the elites that O'Neill rails against? It's both. Well, here's the gentleman. This is in his own words. A sub-Danny Dyer, obnoxious intellectual wind-up merchant. That was apparently comment in The Guardian. But in the text here it says he's the editor of Spiked magazine. So fascinating quality of people that Spiked have got working for them. And we'd encourage people to go and read Guy Debord's Cat blog because there's a very detailed analysis asking some pretty penetrating questions as to what the allegiances are and what the real thought on paedophiles loose in society, what the real thought on that is. Well, let's come back to Spiked, and we've got the managing editor here, Viv Reagan. We had a little look for her via the Great Debate. This brought us to World Right, which is just mentioned there at the end of the arrow. Who are they? Well, fascinating organisation. World Right is a UK-based charity with a remit to provide educational projects and programmes. This is a globalist organisation which is clearly saying we need to get people together across the world, get rid of nation-state borders, Mike, bring them together. Absolute globalist material. So interesting to see that we've got Viv Reagan here in her early days, I hasten to add. But we did pick up on the name of Ms. Dingle. And if you have a little look for her, she's got a background with the Revolutionary Communist Party. And there's the connection to living Marxism. But what's interesting, if we have a look at the historical overview of this organisation, is it says that in 1992 there was a European tour examining the Holocaust and contemporary racism involving young volunteers in the UK and partner groups in Frankfurt, Berlin and Paris, and a centre was opened in Birmingham. Just highlight that. And down here, of course, it tells us that in 1997 they become a charity. So we'd just like to know who was funding during the first 5 years. And when we went researching, it didn't get any better, because if we came back on Ms. Dingle, she said that she set up and developed the charity in 1994. So there's still 2 missing years. And our question is, who put the money into this organisation? Would I be surprised if there was a little bit of open society and George Soros, Mike? I don't think so.
Well, I wouldn't be.
If anybody else can help us out with what Spike's real agenda is, we'll be interested to know. But from those articles, which we would encourage you to read, it seems the agenda is to completely dampen down and destroy any claims that there is large-scale paedophilia at work in this country, particularly connected to Westminster.
Right, well, this morning, David Cameron pushed out a tweet. I will shortly give a speech outlining how the government is delivering on its commitments made in May 2015. Hashtag government delivers. So I just thought, well, what does the government deliver? So let's have a look at a couple of examples, Brian. So the government delivers poverty to millions, food banks. It certainly delivers that. It delivers poor health care. It delivers no education. It delivers paedophile cover-ups. It certainly does that as well, doesn't it? So government really delivers here. And of course it delivers bombs to all kinds of places, Libya, Syria, Iraq, all kinds of places it loves delivering bombs to. So I want to applaud David Cameron now for what government delivers. I think they do a brilliant job at delivering all kinds of brilliant things.
I better just point out that is sarcasm, Mike. Few people get concerned at some of the things we say. But absolutely right. The Tories delivering what they say they will deliver, which is poverty, paedophilia and bombs on Syria. How can we stop it? Well, we have clearly been shown the way, and that is by massive exposure and people coming to the fore and exposing it in a polite, reasonable way. Many people think that if you are reasonable when you send emails to MPs, it doesn't have the effect. In fact, the opposite is true, because of course those emails can be read by other people. They think they're reasonable, they're polite, they're well constructed, and it doesn't put you at risk of having said something a little bit too far, a little bit over the edge, which enables you to get a visit from the police. So let's focus on the people we have in Parliament, criminals and paedophiles, some of them, and can we expose them for what they are? Well, on the subject of delivering, we'll just leave you with this thought. This is obviously from Dutch News, and the headline is "A New Type of Postman Delivering Letters and Reporting Dog Mess." Well, the subject of this article is a bit more serious than that, because effectively what you're being told here is that postmen and women are going to be used to become sort of spying agents of the state. And that took my mind back many years ago to the German lady who said what was so horrible about the rise of the Third Reich was the way it came in slowly, step by step, like the drip of an anaesthetic. And of course, this is what we can see when we put these things together. David Cameron at the moment clearly building a police state in Britain. That police state is an inherent part of the European Union collective, the supranational state. It's up to all of us to do something to stop it. And what better way than to win that microphone and get your own podcast going? Dark times for UK. Don't sit at home fretting. Can you do something about it? Yes. The simplest thing, speak out, tell other people. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.